Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Ryan Smith. This is ModX Network Voices. I'm joined by my partner, Ivan Rupnik. Ivan.
Hey Ryan, how's it going?
Thanks for joining. We're always excited to have Ivan and guests come on the show. Today we have another expert. This is Matt Collins and Luke Grimsrude. Got it right this time. Want to welcome both of these gentlemen. They are from Uptic Studios in Spokane, Washington. They're here to talk about a pretty innovative circular economy model. We've talked about that on this show quite a bit. And so with that, I want to introduce them and ask them if they'd like to share a little bit about a prototype project they've been working on called Blockhouse Life, and one in particular in Spokane. So Matt, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Ryan and Ivan. Thank you all. Yes, we are here today to talk about a project called Blockhouse Life. This project has an interesting origin story in that it came from a sustainability research trip we did over in Scandinavia, and particularly in Copenhagen. This was a coalition from Washington State that I'm not exactly sure who put it together, but it was an opportunity for us to tour and be educated on how various building systems were being built over there and how they were addressing sustainability and circular economies. In particular, how they're using mass timber, wood, as a means to develop high-performance building envelopes. Being that we're in Spokane, Washington, we share a lot of the same natural resources as they do over on that side of the globe. And so we thought it was very applicable for what some of the challenges we have over there. During that trip, actually, I was introduced to Russ Vaagen of Vaagen Timbers, and he was over there researching his new CLT factory that he was getting up and running up in Colville, which is about an hour and a half north of Spokane. So between that kind of exposure to these technologies and connections with Russ, we got back to Spokane and wanted to put some of these, test some of these ideas. We were very fortunate to be introduced to a couple other key partners. Andy Barrett with Berg Technologies. They've been developing military shelters for the last 100+ years, you know, starting with canvas tents, and now they're moved on to kind of this
shipping containers,
crazy,
hybrids, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like a space shuttle / shipping container. But anyway, they have some incredible technologies that they're using for military personnel or triage facilities that they can push out of an airplane and have a pop-up hospital, or, you know, troop sleeping quarters, or, you know, whatever they need. So they have a lot of those technologies developed and figured out for the military. And Andy's interest is, okay, how do we take this military technology and roll it out to the general public, and what lessons can we use there in the current housing crisis that we have. And then our third partner, Cody Coombs, is a developer, regional developer that's multi-generational. They've done a lot of great things for our community, and they really wanted to develop something in Spokane that they could be proud of and start to educate and show people how things can be done the right way, or a different approach to this, starting to, you know, really try to get people to understand why sustainable practices and sustainable living, why it's better for us and better for our environment and all the good things that come from that. So that's the kind of the genesis of this project. And from there, you know, we did a deep dive into what is the best solution. I guess from here, maybe we'll show you a quick video of the project to get you oriented. I can find it here. This is an early SketchUp model, but we stayed fairly true to the vision, but it will help you orientate with the site and see that the site is actually 3 single-family residential sites in a little community or commercial hub outside the core of Spokane. There were 3 derelict houses sitting on it, and we took those down whilst preserving the overall site, the trees, the vegetation that was there, and really came in with a light touch on the site. So I'll show you what that looks like. So there were 3 single-family houses on there, and we were able to put 14 units on the 3 sites with appropriate parking, egress, all that jazz, as well as a myriad of community amenities that we stitched into the project to really make this a community asset.
Yeah, to clarify, that's 14 dwelling units over 8 buildings.
Yes. Thanks, Luke.
Yeah.
So that kind of gets you oriented with the site. Let me zoom through this one more time. Oh, pause. I wanted to go back. Ryan asked an important question early on. One facet of this project that we wanted to utilize was that the developers have an adjacent building, which is a brewery and a little mercantile. This was actually a project we had worked on with Cody Coombs, the developer, several years prior. But this gave us a great platform to create our solar array and do some other recycling and containment in the back. So the project is net zero, and we put all of our panels on the adjacent brewery on this project. The Blockhouse modules themselves were designed so that the solar arrays could be on top as well. But for this situation, it made sense for us to put it on the adjacent brewery. So I guess with that, we can walk into the details a little bit here. What you're seeing is early exploded isometric of the various parts and pieces that we identified and what we're putting into, what we call the kit of parts. Working with the manufacturer to figure out the best approach for not only construction, but delivery and installation. We designed the modules so that they could eventually be shipped as a full built unit. But for this first prototype, it was all panelized and flat packed and put together on site like Legos. And Luke, speak up.
Yeah. you got it.
I can get rambling and forget what I'm talking about. So here you can see some photos of the finished product. You can see the beautiful tree canopies. We were able to achieve that and maintain the trees by using a pier foundation system. So basically the Blockhouse modules are picked up at the 4 corners on a steel pier system. That allowed us to minimize the grading and drop in just, select piers, reorientate the buildings so that we could protect the root balls of those existing trees, because that was really important to the neighborhood. And we wanted to make sure that we maintain that aesthetic.
That's great.
Just keep clicking through here. You can see, through the pictures that we have both 1-story and 2-story units. These are all sitting, they're all individual units that some have shared party walls. But because we're in a residential zone, we decided to stay within that versus going after rezoning. So that was another reason why that determined the overall density that we could achieve with the project. I will also note that all the siding is recycled barnwood from a barn out in the Palouse. As you know, Ryan, there's lots of old barns out in the Palouse, and so we were able to clean up some old wood and use that as our siding, which was very appropriate to this project.
Great idea.
So here's some other earlier models just showing, that we were able to stay pretty true to that vision and kind of tune the design around the various site constraints. Also noting that we pushed a public walkway through the whole site. We thought that, we really wanted to encourage community engagement with this project. Really to, not only stitch it in the community, but help to educate the community as to this type of construction and lifestyle. And we're now putting up actual education placards and other elements to help with the community. So getting into the weeds a little bit, when you're looking at those modules, this is what you're looking at. So we have a 3-bedroom unit, so that's the 2-story. They're all set up on a 12 by 40 grid with the stacked bathroom and back-to-back kitchen and bathroom on the main level. Mm-hmm. And then we have a 1-bedroom unit and then our studio units. And our studio units are more micro housing. Another way to encourage community education and involvement is all of our studios are being run as a short-term rental or Airbnb. So we have a mix of long-term residents and short-term residents within the community. And that's proving to be really valuable. Again, more activity is more safety, especially in this COVID world, just being able to see people. It's been really well received. And then getting into some of the guts, when I talked about the kitchen and bathroom stacked together, we actually developed what we called a smartwall, for lack of much creativity. But we built that smart wall entirely off-site. All of our electrical, mechanical, and plumbing was all integrated into one single wall that we built and had delivered, and that basically plugged into the city utilities. This was both time, cost, and quality control. It worked really well. We had a bit of struggles with the local inspectors because everything showed up finished. So that was something we needed to work through, but it was a great solution, and we're continuing to refine that. This is one of several kind of product development opportunities that have spun out of this project as we, collaborate with these great partners. We start to develop a lot of different products and systems that we hope can, help other people's projects as well. This also gives you a good shot of the CLT. You can see we've used it in walls, floors, stairs. So in the product, all of our walls are CLT, all of our ceilings are CLT, and the two-story floor is also CLT. On this first prototype, we framed in the lower floor, both for insulation and just connectivity of the systems. I think long-term, we will be able to do that out of CLT as well. But again, this is a prototype, and we had to make some MacGyver-like decisions in order to actually get this built.
Was this manufactured, this smart wall, was this manufactured at Berg then, the manufacturing partner?
It was actually Create Spokane. Andy's, quite an entrepreneur, and he's got a million projects going on. So we partnered with another of his companies called Vestas, and we used the Toolbox manufacturing facility to build these. So Toolbox is a nonprofit, kind of workshop, entrepreneurial space that Andy's been developing, and Vestas has a lot of the equipment and know-how to get these things built. So we partnered up with those guys to put these together. And here's just some, call outs of some of the, when I talk about those public amenities, that was really a driving force to this. We were increasing the density in the community. There, as you can imagine, there were some naysayers and that didn't want this to happen. And so we really,
NIMBYism.
Not only do we believe in the project, but we really wanted to add to the community. So, adding, transportation hubs for ride sharing, shelters for that. We actually partnered up with a company called Linked Foods, which is a farm to table food delivery business model. So you go online and you pick out your steaks, and then you go down to Blockhouse and grab them out of the cooler. So that hub is on our site, again, encouraging the public to engage with the site and the residents. And so that's some of those features. Here's some more eye candy, a couple shots of the inside. We are renting them fully furnished for the short-term rentals, and then partially furnished for the longer-term rentals. Showing you how we were able to, preserve a lot of green space, even though we increased the density. I would argue that we probably have more green space than the three houses that were sitting there originally. And really just a really fun, inviting place to live and play. So that's our brief presentation, Ryan. I don't know if you have any other stuff you'd like us to dive into before we roll into the Q&A.
No, I think that's really great. Wonderful. Yeah, if you could unshare your screen, then Ivan will get into starting some questions here. There we go. Ivan, yeah, thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Matt and Luke, and thanks, Ryan, because it's nice for us as architects who also are deep in offsite to see some really beautiful work, but also some very socially engaged work. So we're trying to spread knowledge about modular construction, but there's a lot of content here that exceeds that scope. So maybe one question to start off with, and it's a topic that we're seeing more and more. It's a really big issue in the U.S., particularly in cities, is this kind of question of suburban densification and how we can, we tend to focus either on expensive real estate in cities or greenfield development. And this is a great example of the kind of development we need to see, which is sort of the middle scale where we're really thinking about a kind of urban circular economy. And so maybe, maybe speak a little bit more about the advantages or things that you found in the offsite approach that might have made this project easier or at least less disruptive and less inducive of NIMBYism than typical construction might be. So we've heard about lower construction times, about other kinds of lowering of disruption. Was that something that was discussed before the project as part of resistance or support? Is it something you experienced? And is it something that people have noticed since the project?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big drivers for us in this region is, there's 6 months of the year that's pretty nasty to be out on site. So being able to, control the environment, and that helps the product, but it also helps the people that are working on the product. You can imagine framing in Spokane, Washington, and out on site in January would be pretty brutal. But we do it all the time because that's what we have to do. But that's a huge advantage for us around here. The repetition of tasks is also huge. So once you got a system or procedure down, it's really easy to reproduce in a controlled environment. Whereas out on site, that's pretty difficult to achieve. And then
was there anything specific? So those are all great points in terms of offsite. Was there anything that helped? As you were mentioning the idea that this is higher density, is there anything specific to the offsite approach that helped mitigate, again, community resistance or perception?
Yeah, I would agree with you in that, because when we were on site, we were able to reduce the on-site time, so it's less disruptive for everyone. I mean, how quick did those units go up?
I mean, the first one, since everybody was getting used to the system, took about a week to get all the CLT panels stacked, but by the end of the process, it was down to a day. Wow. And so that was also an economy thing as well. It's like this crane costs X dollars per hour, so the less time you can have it on site, the better. And to speak of the NIMBYism, that was kind of interesting. There was resistance, it seemed like, kind of towards the beginning of the project, but as soon as the GC and all the guys were on site, there were actually neighbors that would stop by daily to see progress and started to get excited about it and ask questions. So it was that initial resistance when there was a construction fence, but when people were actually there, they started to engage, which was kind of cool to see.
Yeah, once they understood what we were trying to achieve, we got a lot more support, than anything. The neighborhood.
So you found you were even educating. You found you were even educating neighbors about this new process, that they were intrigued, they were interested, and then it sort of shifted from being, skepticism towards development to kind of enthusiasm to this new approach to construction.
Exactly. Yeah, and I would also note, when you talk about the on-site stuff versus off-site, these were the first panels out of Vaagen Timbers press, and the first time any of these guys had touched CLT. So, there was a steep learning curve. So the first one, we took our licks, and we're excited to do it again, because we just, we learned so much efficiency and, really working with a new material, and a lot of the processes, it changes the sequence of how things go together and what goes in first. And so, educating the trades that, have been doing the same thing for the last, however long, it's like, well, now we need to do it in the opposite order, right? And so that was just a process to get everyone up to speed.
Well, and it's wonderful that it's an integrated process, that you had all these partners saying, this is what we want to do, not only in the short term for this project. We want to, you have a partnership that hopefully you can take forward into subsequent projects, which is, I'm imagining, what you're doing. And we found that that's incredibly important to realize the benefits. You really have to do this repeatedly to get the benefits down the road. I wanted to pick up on that regulatory comment you made during the presentation. We found that in the past, certainly regulatory barriers continue to be challenging because code is regulated at the municipal level, right? There's no way around that in America. So wanted to see if maybe you could elaborate, or Luke might elaborate on how did you overcome that with the authority having jurisdiction, which is probably Spokane City, I would imagine. So, you know, how did you speak with them?
We had some interesting, education through the process. The first one,
trial by fire.
The zoning. The zoning was pretty advantageous. The owners of the property had gone through a rezone process about a year and a half or so before this project to allow more density on the site. So that was kind of our first little exchange with the jurisdiction. That was all great. That was actually a great one. Where it got a little sticky was with the smartwall specifically, and that came down to the city of Spokane and labor and industries kind of pointing at each other and who's inspecting what and when. And, you know, eventually it did fall back on the city inspectors that went to Vestas to inspect the smart wall before it was shipped up to the site.
Yeah. And how about that smart wall, just to pick up on that, you know, not only regulatory, but did you have other challenges that you could not foresee? You know, as an architect working on this, we have ideas about, oh, and it'll go together like this, and I will just design this smart wall, and then it goes into manufacturing. It's like, holy cow, this is very challenging. So maybe you could just pick up on the smart wall specifically and some of the challenges, is good lessons learned.
And that was a great one, because we actually mocked one up at Toolbox before all of them went into production. So we were able, you know, you can model it and look at it all you want, but until you're really laying out where the conduit's going, where the exhaust fan's going, it doesn't quite all jive. So it was kind of nice to have all the trades there and everybody's kind of troubleshooting it all at once.
Yeah, and I guess to pick up on that, you know, some of the challenges we had is, you know, the guts of the wall, the systems behind the wall, that was relatively easy to package up. But the idea that, you know, all of your fixtures and your finishes and, you know, everything is on that wall, there were elements that that we thought initially we could have this all packed as one wall, but on this project we ended up installing some of the fixtures on site because we were worried that they wouldn't travel well. They couldn't handle the strange forces that get applied to them when they're getting picked up in the air. So there was some learning there. But, you know, to touch on what Luke was just talking about, I think the success of this project was back to that collaboration where we could all sit around, you know, our prototype wall, and the first one was built out of cardboard, and we're looking at it with our plumber and our electrician, you know, and our HVAC guy and the fabricator, and it's like, okay, you know, what's working here, what's not working here, what can we improve on? And those, you know, workshops really proved invaluable as we moved into production.
You mentioned that in a way the project was designed almost as a volumetric modular project. Then you made a decision to go kit parts in terms of the production and also the way that what was done on site. Well, what was done off site and what was done on site. That's interesting to us also to understand. Would you, as moving forward, do you see the advantage of a system that can kind of swing both ways, in terms of it taking advantage of different conditions, or do you see some advantages to kind of optimizing in one direction or another?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's advantages in both directions, and so we wanted to develop a system that was applicable to both. You know, being able to throw a completed unit on a truck and have it, you know, being able just to drop on site and be ready to go is definitely advantageous. The panelized modular kit of parts not only gives us the flexibility to customize and adapt these things, but it also allows us to break it down. you know, so you know, you drop this unit on site, but you know, you may want to move it away or take it down, and so being able to unpack it easily has a lot of value, and that's a facet of this project that we're really taking a deeper dive on, is, you know, that quick assembly and deassembly. We see a big need for that, and just the housing crisis that we're all you know, in at the moment. So yeah, I think we need both, you know, and we really wanted something that we could adapt, you know, have some fundamental components in our kit that, you know, I always go back to the Yakima ski rack. You know, you kind of have your bars, but then you know, you can accessorize it to meet and customize it to your specific needs, and that was kind of the approach we took.
How has your role as an architect changed in this project, and how do you see it changing in the future? It seems to be on the border of architect / product designer, and maybe you could just talk about that. We are professors, as you know.
Construction manager as well. Yeah.
Yeah, we teach students, and we're trying to explain how that role is changing for architects, and that's not a bad thing. It's just applying a skill set in a different way for the sake of realizing greater levels of housing and productivity in design and construction. So maybe you could talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point, Ryan. And I don't know how much you know about my past, but my master's is actually in product design. And I've always thought of design as a more holistic problem-solving process than whether you're designing a house or a toothbrush or a boat or a helicopter. You know, you kind of go through the same steps of identifying that design criteria. I think, and Luke, while he doesn't have the education in the industrial design, he's very mechanically inclined and systems inclined. So, you know, I think as architects, you know, it's on us to really understand the systems that we're trying to design with and around and improve upon. And so it's forcing us to understand all the parts and pieces that make up a building a lot more maybe than in years past,
right?
Especially if we're starting to build off-site. You know, you're not working necessarily with a general contractor. You're working with fabricators, right? And so that forces you to kind of be the knowledge base to then kind of shepherd that project through and educate them on, you know, what are the building. They don't know anything about building codes, right? They know how to build stuff, but they're not tradesmen. So it's kind of changing the players we're working with.
It changes speaking of the trades, it's changing the trades a little bit as well. I mean, that was one of the discussions, and actually quite a few of the trades guys, when they were working on the smart wall specifically, were like, oh, this is great. Like, I'm in a nice, like, 70-degree heated building and it's like snowing outside. So this is great. I would love to do this all the time. And this is all that I do, is just build these smart walls in a nice conditioned space.
So that's, you know, you were talking about the community. So the community was, you know, resistive. We're obviously increasing the density of the community, and there's some resistance. Once they understood what we were doing, everyone got really excited about it and were totally supportive. Kind of the same with the construction, the tradesmen, and that group. You know, they were very resistant, like, oh, what is this modular stuff? You're going to take away my job. You're trying to design me out of a job. And once they understood what they're doing and the benefits for, you know, their craft, they were totally on board as well and super supportive of, you know, moving this forward. So, you know, we think that, you know, this is where, you know, construction is headed, and, you know, we're excited to be at the table, you know, trying to figure this out.
Maybe just a follow up on the trades too, and there's a lot to unpack here, and we've got a limited amount of time. But one thing, you guys made you made a big double leap into offsite and also CLT in this project with trades. What we've been seeing is that even getting panelized or volumetric light wood frame, which is something people are a little more familiar with, is a challenge. Do you feel like is CLT bringing things to the table that you don't see as possible in the sort of light wood frame, more typical sort of systems have you noticed other advantages to that? And is there more barriers in terms of familiarity of the trades or working with CLT?
I mean, the biggest challenge is also the advantage with CLT is that it all has to be thought out ahead of time, and so I think the framers, they're used to just, with a framed wall, you can easily like adjust it in the field, do whatever you need to do to make it work. Whereas a CLT wall, you don't, unless you're going to bust out a big chainsaw and start hacking this thing apart, you don't have that flexibility. So that was, both the good and the bad. I guess the CLT, it has some great qualities, both structurally and, energy performance, and that we can't achieve with typical framed walls. So that was why we were going that route, and also tying back to the circular economy that Vaagen Timbers is working on. They're able to use small growth managed forests and tie that into the overall story. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah. And you're saying, and that's an important point too, that actually the lumber that Vaagen's working with may not even would have never made its way into typical 2x4s.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
That's interesting too. Yeah, and I don't know if the audience. I mean, since we're fortunate to have an international audience. That's we've seen, for example, in Sweden, the CLT is made from the same high quality 2x4s and 2x6s that go into panelized or volumetric, but in the US, we don't have that kind of forestry sector. So CLT has an added advantage in our context that we sometimes take for granted.
Yeah, they wouldn't, Vaagen, and that's why Vaagen spent a lot of time abroad, is, they're a large lumber, forest management company. And so learning how to, find products that actually helps them manage their forest. With CLT, they're able to use much smaller wood than they would use in a production run to make, nominal lumber. So that it fits into their story very well.
So to send us off, we have one more question for Luke and Matt, and that is, what with your partners is the future of Blockhouse Life? This was, as I've heard you describe it, a prototype or our first iteration. So what is the future?
It's going a lot of different directions at the moment, as you can probably imagine. And because we're designers and never like to do the same thing twice, our next prototype, I think, will be stacking these things in a more vertical fashion, looking at how we can, bring it into the commercial code and start to, increase density. We're kind of taking two different directions where, we're exploring, how to tighten up that box for, applications like ADUs and temporary housing, and, a much lighter touch with single unit production. And then the flip side is, how do we increase density and create a module that we can, go into a more urban environment. So we're trying to hit kind of out in the suburban and rural, address those issues, whilst also, you know, bringing it back into the cities. So.
Ivan and I want to thank Matt Collins and Luke Grimsrude for coming and joining us here today. This is ModX Network Voices. We have been very fortunate to learn about Blockhouse Life. And thank you, gentlemen, for spending time with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.